Salutations, people of the internet and the world. This is Andre Klein, the owner and operator in Phantom Studio, and this week we're on our 8 out of 8 part series, so this is the very end, and our second out of 2 deep dives of a genre. Let's get started. The genres we'll be looking at today is M/Preg and Omegaverse, and you all must be wondering, why is she wearing a lab coat? I thought since this week we'll be talking about fictional biology, that would dress up like a fictional doctor. Just so y'all know, I do not have my doctorate. I'm just wearing this to go on with the theme of the week, and that is all. So let's dive in, shall we? Meaning of these genres. Impreg is the term for a genre of art and literature where a man is pregnant. Naposos. Preg, having a child or offspring developing in the body. Dictionary. Omegaverse, also known as ABO, is a subgenre of speculative erotic fiction and originally a subgenre of erotic/fan fiction. Stories in the genre are premised on societies wherein humans are divided into a dominant hierarchy of dominant alphas, neutral betas, and submissive omegas. Wikipedia. Untraditional Omegaverse is where anyone can get pregnant in that universe, no matter the designation or gender. Fascinating. Origin of the genres. While there are a few Impreg fan works from the 1980s, which is pretty cool, it is a genre that was not generally addressed by fans until the mid to late 1990s. Nowadays in fandoms, Impreg is mostly commonly found in fan works written in ABO universe, where male omegas have the ability to become pregnant. Impreg as a trope is isolated and is increasingly rare in fan works thanks to the popularity of ABO, but only because it tends to appear as a part of that larger universe, which is true, but Omegaverse and Impreg are still two separate labels in publishing and have different expectations from fans, which we'll touch upon in a little bit. Fanlore. The origin of the contemporary Omegaverse subgenre is typically attributed to the fandom surrounding the American television Supernatural. Gotta love Supernatural. Gotta love them. As an offshoot of the male pregnancy subgenre of erotic fanfiction. Yes, that's a fun fact. Omegaverse originated with the Supernatural fandom. I think it was between twin sets between Sam and Dean, where people are a little iffy on, but local rights expanded now, which is completely mind-blowing and so enjoyable. Characteristics of the genre. Part 1. Characteristics for Omegaverse. Alphas are very dominant, though in some stories they can be submissive, like Beard Wanted by Sasha Hawkins, and they are typically very masculine, but that's not always the case. And traditionally, they can only get pregnant, but there's a big boom in some works where they can get pregnant, like Alphas and Heat by Andrew Winshart. Sometimes they have rest times where they're every month or sometimes during the year where they have high sex drives. They can be female or male. Typically when people think of Omegaverse, they think of only male alphas, but there are some stories where there's female alphas too. Betas are the middle ground, who can be dominant or submissive, can get omegas pregnant, and then sometimes they can get pregnant themselves. But in other universes, they are either sterile or have very low fertility. They can be female or male. You see this in the Trident series. Betas are infertile all across the spectrum. In the Northern Law universe by Sasha Hawkins, they have a very low fertility. They can get pregnant and get others pregnant, but it's very rare and very hard to do. Omegas are caregivers and who are typically submissive, but in some stories they can be power bottoms or even dominant, like in Mastered Wanted by Sarah Hawkins. They're the ones who become pregnant, though there's probably some works out there where they can get people pregnant. I personally haven't seen it, but with the high rise in alpha preg, it wouldn't surprise me that somewhere out there there's a story where omegas can get other omegas pregnant, or even betas or alphas. This genre is endless as creativity, so it wouldn't surprise me if it's out there somewhere. Many stories, they have heat cycles, where they have intense sex drives, and it is their most fertile times. In some stories, it's the only time they can get pregnant. They can be female or male. When typically think of Omegaverse, you think of male omegas, and sometimes this is the case, but other times there are female omegas as well. Shapeshifters, they are beings that can switch their designations and or genders to fit their needs and desires. They would be non-binary in designation, like Reham from the Outcast series by Grace Brown. In that series, with Grace Brown and Harper B. Cole, in that series, Raison is a dragon who takes typically a male form, but because of his mate is an alpha, he takes the designation of omegas for their mating. Characteristics of the genre, Part 2. Characteristics of Impreg is a universe where males, humans, or supernatural or paranormals can get pregnant, but may they be cis, transgender, also known as seahorse pregnancies, which can be taken as highly insulting, so I recommend not using this term, or they can be intersex. These stories are typically male on male, but there are some where it's straight couples where the female gets the male pregnant. These dynamics, however, this device is not common, but there are a few stories, like in the Northern Lost Pack spin-off, the Northern Pines Den, there's a mention of a female alpha and her male omega. They're side characters, but they are mentioned out through the universe in other stories as well. Some subgenres in this genre, Preg. F-Preg. This is where a female can get another female pregnant. In Omegaverse, this would be a female alpha or beta getting a female omega pregnant. It can also happen with an intersex female with working male reproductive organs, or a male to female transgender getting another female pregnant. This is just the typical avenues, but for the writers and artists, they can do something completely different. Creativity is endless. This is just the typical avenues people can take, but people can always do something different. Creativity is endless, and this genre is one that you can do whatever you want with, and let the creativity explore and do something new if you want to. Reverse Preg. This is where a female can get a male pregnant. In Omegaverse would be a female alpha or beta getting a male omega pregnant. It can also happen with an intersex female with working male reproductive organs, or a male to female transgender getting an intersex male with working female reproductive organs, or a female to male transgender pregnant. I guess it was above, because this is the normal avenues creators usually take, but writers and artists can do whatever they please and might come up with something completely different that's so out of the norm of these avenues. These are just some examples of ways you can go about it. Egg preg is where someone gives birth to an egg, and it or them are delivered. They will develop outside of the body, and when it's fully developed, this will turn into a reptile or reptile shifter, or dragon shifter. As you see in the Forbidden Desire series, in that series, the omegas give birth to eggs, they gestate for a year, and then hatch into dragons, and eventually turn into kids, and then won't turn back into dragons until during their 10 years. Creation Preg. This is where, like gods like Zeus, when he made Athena by conjuring the child from one's mind, or making them from or through magic. You also see this with Red Witch from X-Men, when her and her husband wanted children. Since he was a cyborg, she used her magic and create them twins, hence Creation Preg. Alpha preg, which is something fairly new, is where a beta or another alpha can get an alpha pregnant. You see this with alpha's heat, which is when got me first introduced to alpha preg, which I find is very fascinating, seeing this dichotomy, and makes me wonder what other avenues untransitional Omegaverse can go. Omega preg is where omegas can get other omegas pregnant. These and alpha preg would be considered non-transitional Omegaverse. Like alpha preg, omega preg is something that would be considered untransitional, since alpha are usually the ones who get omegas pregnant, and omegas are usually the ones getting pregnant, not reverse, so it's very interesting. Stone preg is where someone gives birth to a child encased in stone and have to chisel the baby or babies out of it. Like in Legacy Warriors series by C.C. Hawkins, there's a couple of gargoyles, and they gestated for 6 months, but when their child was born, that child was encased in stone, and their parents had to chisel them out to get to their son. This is a very interesting take on verse. Omegaverse versus Preg. Even though Preg has merged with Omegaverse and has become an element of that genre, they're still considered different labels when publishing, therefore have some differences. With Omegaverse, with the alpha, beta, omega, gamma, or otherwise dynamic is seen. If a series is labeled that way, that means there is male pregnancy in that universe, but doesn't mean every book in the series will have a birth or the main character getting pregnant, or not a male pregnancy at all, but still have the A-B-O dynamic featured in it. But that only if the author specifically says that. Otherwise, this label on a story or work will follow the standard norm for the definition of the genre. If the author doesn't say otherwise, then when you see Omegaverse, then automatically assume there is male pregnancy in the story, unless specifically said otherwise by the creator. While with Preg, if a series has this label on each of the books, that means there has to be a pregnancy, all the cutesy moments that go with it, and a birth, may it be graphic or not. If not, fans will be highly upset, for that will be mislabeling product. With Preg, that means there has to be a pregnancy, a birth, a child at some point in that story. Otherwise, that's mislabeling a product and goes against this genre's definition. Content. If you do not like explicit content, then I recommend going to the part of the video where it says end of explicit content to see my final thoughts and things like that. Otherwise, if you're okay with explicit content, please continue. As you can see, we're at the biology portion of our segment. Starting off the biology chart, these two charts were done by some very talented artists that are very detailed and look like actual anatomy charts. The chart on the right has the basic anatomy for an omega or a male who can get pregnant. As you can see right here is where it would be the flap, which would be separating the vagina opening from the anus cavity. During a heat time, that flap would cover the passage to the anal cavity, meaning during intercourse, if there's no contraception, the sperm would have a very clear shot to get to the vagina and eventually getting to the uterus to fertilize that egg. And then in 9 to 3 months, you would be a baby. And as you can see, as a sample start of, there's the anal cavity, the rectum, the uterus is right here, ovaries, and then in general other parts of biology. Or the chart on the left is showing a male who's getting close to birth and probably at the 8 months mark. As you can see right here, his opening is to his vagina is slowly opening, meaning it will block the anal cavity off. So during delivery, since it looks like this one would be an anal delivery, if there wasn't any complications where a C-section would be needed, that flap would close, so during the delivery, the baby would not have any chance of getting feces on him or her, or them. and hopefully to have a healthy delivery. Sadly, I couldn't find any anatomy charts for the other body parts for different types of omegas in different universe. But if we were talking about the Kingdom of Landrum series, their bursting opening would be right here in the section between the ballsack and anus. So they would have what they would call a sheath or vagina opening. So if they wanted to get pregnant, they would have intercourse through that opening. That opening would lead up to here, to the same flap, to the full vagina opening, and then to the uterus, where in 9 months, if the egg was fertilized, there would be a baby. The other form of anatomy would be right here. Just below the belly button would be something called a bursting seam. If you were talking about the Blood Legacy series or doing something like that, the partner would ejaculate on the partner's stomach. The bursting seam would absorb the sperm into the skin, and then if the seed took, they would become pregnant, and the bursting seam would open enough for the doctor to reach in to deliver the baby that way. Fascinating. Genetics and Conception in Impreg, Part 1. The big question people ask, how does this happen? Well, I'm going to tell you more in detail. This could fall on the same basic as a normal conception if the male on the story vagina tract is attached to the anal canal. In some stories, the biology explains the physiology, the physical flap that you can act like the door between the anal cavity and the vagina tract, and during conception and like during heat, it will block the anal cavity for the sperm to go up to the vagina and through to the cervix to the uterus to fertilize the egg. Suppose the male's character has a vaginal tract, usually located in the space between the testicles and the anus. In that case, it's like a normal conception. A male sticks his penis into the vagina and ejaculates and swims up to the cervix, to the uterus to fertilize the egg. And Conception in Impreg, Part 2. In stories where menage a trois plays a role, the author wants the characters to have the children biologically all of theirs. They may play around with genetics, where there's a 24-hour window, which is how some twins or multiples can have different fathers. This is like with cat pregnancies. If a female cat has intercourse with more than one male cat in a 24-hour window, so you can have a litter with different fathers. Same with humans, it's very rare. If a woman were to have sex at a sex party with multiple men without contraceptive or protection, or say she had multiple partners and she was with them in 24 hours span, she might be able to have twins or multiples that are not having the same father. And that's one way an author can play with menage a trois, where they're where the child is somehow genetically all theirs. Or the author might play with the genetics, where a person may be a male or female, or being can only become pregnant if they're in a multiple relationship and the person has rapid fire sex. The body is holding more than one sperm and it somehow fuses it through magic, or somehow the author explains it, into one sperm, and it fertilizes the egg. That way, if the child were to get tested biologically, it would come out as being all the partner's child through that magic or twist of genetic profiling the author works with. When it comes to egg prey, once the egg is fertilized, the genetics, if it's a shifter story where it's a reptile or dragon, if the genetic for that dragon is dominant or reptile is dominant, then the person that's carrying the child will have a clutch or a single egg. The egg will then be formed and developed as any reptile offspring will, and once it's fully developed, it will be hatched. the child or dragon or reptile shifter, or reptile or dragon, or if they want to play it out, develops for whatever length the author desires, and then hatches into whatever their outcome may be. Maybe a dragon, a reptile of some kind, or even a baby. With alpha anatomy, if the male alpha, they have the same anatomy as a regular male. If it's a shifter, they may have different penises. However, if it's a shifter story with a werewolf, the shifter could have a knot. A feline shifter could have some type of vortex or spines like a cat. Basically, they could have any type of genitalia that their animal counterparts has. Like if there are snakes or shifters, they may have two penises like some snakes do. Another is female alphas. Then they may be intersex or have a penis coming out of where the clitoris would be, or have a penis and balls with a vagina opening underneath it, or however the author wants to play with that. There's endless way to play with genetics or biology, as long as they think through it carefully and it makes sense with the story plot. And conception in Impreg, Part 3. And if it's a taboo story and they turn into animals or creatures or beings, they may conceive in the transformation form. And if some shifters are paranormal stories, they might even give birth in that transformation form. It truly depends on what the author wants to do with regarding conception and birth. And if the story, the character is intersex, then the author could write where their reproductive organs, may it one or both, are active. That's how they may explain it. Or if they're doing the transgender route and character, then they probably will have them keep their reproductive organs, even if they're transitioning. With these routes, you have to be very careful and respectful in how you explain it, so you're not fetishizing or glamorize, or doing anything that could be considered insulting or disrespectful to those minorities. So you have to be very careful when you go with those routes when you're doing this genre or anything like that. Other people usually stick to other avenues or other ways when explaining how the males are getting pregnant in their anatomy and biology. So pretty much that's why they usually do different avenues or things like that to explain the anatomy and biology of how the males are pregnant, how this even can happen in the story. If they're a shapeshifter and or have the ability to shapeshift, like Mystique from X-Men or Racine from Outcast Chronicles, they can change their external anatomy or internal anatomy to fit their desires at will. Like with Raynon, when he was mating Simon, he became an Omega since Simon was an Alpha. If it had been reversed, he would have become an Alpha if Simon had been an Omega. So the rules are endless because of their abilities. The types of birth, Part 1. There are so many different ways a writer can do a birthing scene. This is endless with the imagination, but the standard ones are natural birth, where the child comes out of the anus or vaginal tract if they have that, or the character has a separated vaginal tract, then the child comes from there. If it's a were or shifter based story, they might transform into their other selves and give birth that way, because in some stories they explain it's a lot more easier to give birth into their animal or bestial forms than in their human form. With C-section, there are 3 types of C-sections. The first being surgery to cut the child out of the body. The second is birthing seams, like lines that just underneath the navel that will open enough to put your hand in to reach and bring the child out. The second kind of birthing seam will open up and literally push the child like a vaginal tract out of the body for the doctor, healer, or midwife to catch them. The types of birth, Part 2. Another birth is the egg birth, where the parent that is in labor will lay an egg, and then it will have a few months or a few years to gestate before it hatches. The same method applies for stone births, like in the Gargoyles in the Legacy Warrior series, where the parent gave birth to a stone child and had to chisel the stone off the git to the baby after the little one was born. This next one, man, this is where the explicitity comes out. I've only seen this once, but here we go. This next one is not very common. Like I said, I've only seen it once in a story. That was when the partner gave birth to their penis. Yes. So imagine a watermelon-sized infant coming out of a hole the size of a pea. I've only seen it done once, but it wouldn't surprise me if other authors have run this avenue. I haven't seen it since that one time. End of explicit content. It's safe to continue. If you skip to this part, you'll see the end of the video. My interpretation of the genre. I absolutely love this genre and everything about it because there's so much you can do with a creativity. You can put this genre in any, you can put this format in any genre and it will still come out being a good piece if done right. It's an example of how interesting and creative the mind can be. It's all the fun looking at the psychology and the emotional aspect of coming from the point of view. And with Preg, there's so many things you can do with psychology aspect of it, emotional, how it feels for the characters, like with the Blood Legacy series, the Lycans, the father who impregnated the female got morning sickness instead of the actual female, which is a kind of interesting twist on that aspect of pregnancy. So it's really cool what you can do with this genre. You can do some emotional aspects coming from the point of view of Preg regarding society, relationships, dynamics, and things like that. Was the hierarchy with omegas and alphas, how you can play with that, or with the Kingdom Alandrum series, all the men could get pregnant, but they decide who would be the carrier parent based on status and wealth. It's fun with planning those cutie scenes between the couples seeing them how they bond with each other during the experience, like them rubbing each other's feet or being like just times waking up to get the snacks for each other and the cutesy adorable parts that come with it. It also is really good to get the gears running when you have to figure out the minutes of it, how it will flow, how you can use stretch of the imagination and belief, and all in all, it's an interesting genre to explore. There's so many things you can do with it, and it's such a vibrant thing to play around with. With all the minute things, it's really fun, and I just love working with it. Why this genre should be allowed in an academic setting for writing classes? The reason why this should be allowed more in workshops in a school setting is because it is a genre and a device that is used. It would be very helpful and beneficial for people who want to get into this genre to have that chance to explore and experience it being in workshops and an academic setting. The criticism and the writing can get fine-tune their craft, and feedback from classmates, what works and what doesn't work, and like any type of workshop, because it helps them prepare and grow and seeing the feedback firsthand. Like with any type of genre or tool, you want to have that chance to workshop it, to get feedback and seeing your audience reacting firsthand, so you can practice the minute details and things like that, so when you graduate, or if you're publishing while you're working in school, that you'll know what works and what doesn't work firsthand. And I feel like the Impreg should be allowed to do it more, because then you're going to see the face-to-face reaction of your readers firsthand. They can take what they've learned and improve with each story on how to make a flow and feel realistic and relatable and realistic if they are doing a realistic piece, or how to make it different and unique if it's a sci-fi, fantasy, mystery story, etc. Like with anything, the more people do it, the more people see it being done and craft them, and any preconceived notion might be altered or expanded on, anything, but to say no, just power. And like I say, power and knowledge is something can be better. With power and with more you say in power and knowledge isn't actually a good. It was a very actually a very good thing. So the more people see it, any preconceived notion they have may disappear or expand it on, but they can make an authentic and objective opinion of their own, not going by preconceived notions or someone else is saying it. By them seeing it firsthand, they can make an objective, or somewhat, like there's always bias on these things, but make somewhat of an objective opinion on their experience, and that's the experience of others or what they've heard or the stereotypes that go wrong with it. Well, that's the end of our final segment. Thank you so much for this awesome journey I've had with you guys. It's been so much fun creating these videos for you. I hope you've enjoyed them. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful winter. Ciao, bellas.